2020, the gig economy grew by over 25%. So that means that people that had never had a side hustle before, worked self-employed, had gone up by 25%. And out of that 25%, over half of them had never had any kind of self-employment income before, which means that they've never had to report this on their tax return before. And it's good to understand that it's a very different thing reporting self-employed income. This really gets into the meat and potatoes of what we do at the tax force, is helping people to navigate through that. The self-serve tax programs are fantastic. And if you go through them and you answer all of the questions exactly correctly, meaning how they were designed, you could have a pretty good outcome. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get all the deductions that you're necessarily entitled to, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So if you don't know to put the information in, if you didn't know to keep track of certain types of expenses that you're allowed, the program might not prompt you for that. And that's something big that we do, is that we have those conversations with people. We know what we expect to see on a tax return. We know what type of expenses certain kinds of businesses would normally have. And so we open a dialogue up and say things, ask the questions, did you have X or did you have Y? And if you did, get us that information. We're going to include that on your return. We know where it goes. That's going to lower your net income, which is going to lower your taxable income. The Tax Act actually says that you're allowed to arrange your affairs in such a manner that you pay the least amount of tax, which is tantamount to saying, if something is deductible, it should be included. And so again, there's a curve that you're learning your new gig to what is deductible and what's not. I really encourage people to reach out, watch blogs like this, do some reading, get some education, and think about hiring a professional, because the cost that we charge can be small in comparison if you miss out some pretty simple deductions that you'd be entitled to. And there are a lot of things as well that you might think, I made 10 grand, but I spent 10 grand, so I'm good. I don't have to report, or my income is actually zero.
You still have to report it.
You do still have to report it, one. And two, just because you spent the money doesn't necessarily mean it's deductible. Maybe you spent your money in inventory that you still have. That's not a deduction for this year. Maybe you spent your money on capital equipment. You bought a computer or hardware or a vehicle, something like that. That's not all deductible in the first year. So just because you can say, well, the bank account's got no more money at the end of the year than it did at the beginning, doesn't mean that there's not net taxable income there. And when you're starting something new, there's so many hats you have to wear. I mean, if you've got an Etsy store, you're trying to figure out your website, you're trying to figure out social media, you're trying to figure out marketing, you're trying to figure out products, what's the best product, what's the best price point. There's so many things that you're educating and focusing yourself on, that oftentimes the bookkeeping and the taxation of it's like, I'm going to worry about that later, because it doesn't matter what tax I got to pay. I got to worry about making sales today.
Easy to push that to the side.
So common to have that pushed to the side. But the problem is that if you don't then deal with it properly, when it is time, again, maybe you're paying too much. And that doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't matter how much money you make. It matters how much money you keep. And
right.
A bill to the government is just like a bill to anybody else. The money's gone. You don't get to spend it on you and your family and your hobbies and your loved ones and all of that fun stuff. So keeping your tax bill down, it can be an integral part to making sure that your operation is running as efficiently as possible. And you do that by understanding what belongs on the tax return, where it belongs on the tax return, and bulletproofing those filings, so that if the government ever does come knocking and saying, we'd like to just have a second look at what you sent us, that you're confident in the fact that what you did send them is going to be correct, and that experience is not going to be negative.